The moment Meghan Markle finally broke her silence, the world seemed to pause. But what she said in that intimate, hush-hush interview would shock even those who thought they knew every scandal surrounding her. Imagine for a moment the whispers you've heard in tabloids, the murmurs shared in hushed corners of social media, and the stories that no mainstream outlet dared to publish. Now, imagine those whispers confirmed by Meghan herself. Would you believe it? Could the rumors about her and Prince Andrew, the Duke who had already been at the center of countless controversies, actually be true? What she revealed was more than just gossip. It was a revelation that threatened to upend not just reputations, but the very foundation of the royal family's carefully curated public image. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. It all started months before the world would hear her words. Behind the glittering lights of red carpets, royal engagements, and photo ops designed to paint perfection, there were tensions brewing that few could see. Meghan, now an established public figure in her own right, had endured years of media scrutiny, palace intrigue, and relentless speculation about her personal life. The rumors linking her to Prince Andrew had swirled for years, often dismissed as the overactive imaginings of tabloids hungry for clicks. But inside the palace corridors, whispers persisted, and the tension was palpable. Staff members exchanged knowing glances when certain names were mentioned. Loyal aides and courtiers alike had to navigate a minefield of secrecy, rumors, and potential scandals that could erupt at any moment. And in the center of it all was Meghan, who had lived in the public eye yet managed to keep certain truths entirely her own, until now. Picture this: a private meeting, a quiet room, and a conversation that would forever alter the narrative surrounding Meghan Markle. There were no cameras, no reporters, no audience, just Meghan, speaking candidly about the aspects of her life that had been speculated on for years. And the words she spoke, though measured and carefully chosen, carried an intensity that could barely be contained. They were words that would ripple through the media, ignite social media debates, and provoke both outrage and curiosity in equal measure. Some would call it a confession, others a strategic move. But one thing was clear: whatever she revealed, it wasn't going to stay quiet for long. Why does this story matter now, more than ever? Because timing is everything. Meghan's revelation did not emerge in isolation. It coincided with mounting tensions within the royal family, renewed public scrutiny over Prince Andrew's past, and a media landscape that thrives on scandal. At a moment when royal reputations were already fragile, the confirmation of her relationship, or intimate encounters, with Andrew added fuel to a fire that had been smoldering for years. Every headline, every tweet, every gossip column now had context. The world could no longer speculate in the abstract. Meghan's voice had entered the conversation, and it carried weight. The stakes weren't just personal, they were monumental. Consider this: the monarchy operates not just on tradition, but on perception. Every action, every revelation, every scandal has implications that extend far beyond the individuals involved. A confession like this could affect royal alliances, public perception, and even political considerations. For Meghan, it was also about reclaiming narrative control. For years, she had been portrayed as the enigmatic figure at the center of rumor and speculation. Now, she had the power to speak, to clarify, and, in her own way, to assert authority over her story. And yet, even in doing so, she stepped into a storm. Audiences at home, scrolling through headlines or refreshing their social feeds, would soon witness a cascade of reactions. Social media exploded almost instantly after news leaked of her interview. Fans expressed shock, some with admiration for her courage, others with disbelief or outright condemnation. Memes circulated, videos went viral, and debate raged in comment sections across platforms. But beyond the digital frenzy, the real drama unfolded behind palace walls. Families, advisors, and associates scrambled to process the revelation, each trying to navigate the fallout in a world where reputation is currency and secrets are rarely kept for long. Yet, even with all this public chaos, Meghan's confirmation carried a subtle emotional weight. It wasn't delivered as a boast or a provocation. It was conveyed with reflection, nuance, and a palpable tension. She spoke of choices, pressures, and moments in her life that had been misunderstood, misrepresented, or completely unknown to the public. In a sense, she offered the world a glimpse behind the carefully curated image, not just of a duchess, but of a woman navigating immense personal and public challenges. It was a human moment wrapped in a sensational headline, a reminder that behind every rumor lies a story that only the person living it truly understands. And here's where curiosity spikes. What exactly did Meghan say about Prince Andrew? How did their relationship, whatever form it took, unfold? Was it fleeting or prolonged? Public speculation had created a narrative, but Meghan's voice promised clarity, insight, and shock value that no one could anticipate. For viewers, the intrigue lies not only in the revelation itself, but in the nuances, the context, the timing, and the consequences. Each detail matters, and each revelation adds another layer to a story that has captivated public imagination for years. But there's more. This isn't just a story about intimacy or scandal. It's about power, secrecy, and survival within one of the most scrutinized families in the world. Meghan's confirmation challenges long-held assumptions, forces the media and public to re-evaluate their understanding of her, and sets the stage for a cascade of reactions that extend far beyond her personal life. The layers of complexity, emotional, political, social, make this revelation far more than a mere tabloid shock. It's a story that speaks to the intricate dynamics of fame, influence, and private choices intersecting with public scrutiny. And as we follow her confession, we see how each ripple of revelation impacts relationships, reputations, and the delicate balance of power within the royal family. As we prepare to dive deeper, consider this. Every chapter, every detail, every account we explore is part of a larger puzzle. Behind Meghan's confirmation are layers of secrecy, long-held suspicions, and unprecedented transparency from someone who has been, for years, one of the most public yet private figures in the world. Each revelation will test your assumptions, challenge the narratives you've accepted, and invite you to reconsider what you thought you knew. By the time we finish, the scandal, the stakes, and the human drama will leave a mark that goes far beyond the headlines. And finally, the mini cliffhanger. Meghan's confirmation was only the beginning. The implications, the reactions, and the hidden truths that followed her statement would ignite a storm no one saw coming. But what came next would change everything, and no one, not even her closest allies, was prepared. This is where the real story begins. What if everything you thought you knew about Meghan Markle was only half the story? What if the whispers you've ignored, laughed off, or scoffed at for years were closer to reality than anyone dared to admit? From the moment Meghan entered the public eye, the world watched her every move. Every glance, every smile, every handshake, dissected, analyzed, and interpreted through the lens of rumor and speculation. But some rumors weren't just about fashion choices, charitable work, or high-profile appearances. Some rumors cut deeper, darker. A shadow that seemed to follow Meghan wherever she went. And at the center of one of the most persistent whispers was Prince Andrew. It's easy to dismiss these rumors when you first hear them. After all, tabloids are notorious for exaggeration, and the royal family has always been a magnet for sensational stories. But in Meghan's case, the rumors were relentless. They lingered, resurfaced, and refused to be silenced. Courtiers exchanged knowing glances. Palace aides whispered in private corridors. Even those closest to Meghan sometimes hesitated to speak openly, aware that anything said could eventually make its way into the public domain. And yet, the rumors persisted, growing in intensity and complexity over time. Consider this. Meghan had just married into one of the most scrutinized families in the world. Every step was monitored. Every encounter was analyzed. Every relationship she formed became subject to public speculation. So when rumors linking her to Andrew began circulating, it wasn't just idle gossip. It became a shadow over her public persona. But why Andrew? Why this particular narrative? Andrew's own history, rife with controversy and scandal, made him a figure already primed for speculation. His public missteps, combined with Meghan's rising prominence, created fertile ground for whispers to flourish. The rumors weren't uniform, either. They came in fragments, some more credible than others. There were murmurs about private meetings, fleeting encounters, and moments that allegedly went unobserved by the press. Social media amplified these whispers, and conspiracy forums dissected every photograph, every public appearance, every casual comment, searching for evidence. And the more these stories circulated, the more they seemed to take on a life of their own. One viral tweet, one misinterpreted photo, one offhand remark in a magazine interview. Suddenly, the rumor was no longer speculation, it was a narrative in the making. But here's what makes this story so compelling. Meghan didn't confirm or deny. She remained, publicly at least, a figure of elegance, poise, and strategic silence. To the outside world, she appeared untouchable. Every rumor bounced off her carefully constructed public image. She smiled at cameras, engaged with charitable work, and attended events with unwavering grace. And yet, behind the polished veneer, the weight of these whispers lingered. Every interaction, every encounter, carried an unspoken tension. The rumors followed her like a shadow she could never escape. Audience, imagine for a moment living under that kind of scrutiny. Every personal choice, every private conversation, every moment of vulnerability becomes fodder for public consumption. Could you maintain your composure, your dignity, and your sense of self when your life is constantly interpreted, judged, and speculated upon? Meghan managed to navigate these treacherous waters for years, but the rumors about her and Andrew persisted, growing louder in whispers, and sometimes becoming impossible to ignore. The palace itself was a complex web of secrecy and strategy. Courtiers and aides were caught between protecting Meghan, maintaining the royal image, and controlling the narrative. The hierarchy of loyalty was delicate. One misstep could ignite a chain reaction that no one wanted to see. And with Meghan, who had previously been an outsider to the royal world, the dynamics were even more complicated. Those loyal to tradition sometimes viewed her with suspicion. Those close to her sought to shield her from the storm of public scrutiny. The result was a constant balancing act, one that often left Meghan isolated despite the millions of eyes watching her every move. Yet even within this whirlwind of rumor and speculation, there were moments that lent credence to the whispers. Private engagements, unseen meetings, fleeting interactions, tiny details that, when pieced together, suggested a pattern. Observers noticed Andrew appearing in places where Meghan was unexpectedly present, or comments from insiders hinted at connections that had previously been invisible to the public. And while nothing was ever publicly verified, the accumulation of these small, seemingly insignificant moments created a mosaic that was impossible to ignore. It wasn't just the palace staff and media speculation, either. Friends, acquaintances, and even some members of the public began to notice patterns. Social media threads dissected every detail, constructing theories, and debating their validity. There were those who staunchly defended Meghan, dismissing the rumors as malicious and unfounded. And then there were those who quietly wondered if, beneath the poised exterior and public statements, there was truth to the stories. The tension between public denial and private curiosity created a fertile environment for speculation, a pressure cooker of secrecy and intrigue. Even Meghan herself couldn't escape the weight of the rumors. Over time, they shaped her interactions, influenced her decisions, and demanded strategic responses. Public appearances were choreographed not just for optics, but to manage perception. Interviews were carefully scripted, and off-camera moments were guarded with increasing vigilance. Yet, despite her efforts, the rumors never truly faded. They persisted, mutating, evolving, and resurfacing at the most unexpected times, leaving a trail of anticipation, doubt, and speculation that followed her like a relentless shadow. Audience, have you ever wondered how someone handles a story that refuses to die, one that everyone whispers about behind closed doors, but no one will confirm? That's the unique pressure Meghan faced, magnified by the high-stakes world of royalty. Every rumor, every speculation, was a thread in a tapestry of tension, each one threatening to unravel the careful image she had worked so hard to maintain. And the truth, as we would soon learn, was far more explosive than anyone could have imagined. By the time Meghan decided to speak, the rumors had existed for years, decades even, if you trace back the origins of Andrew's controversies. The narrative was already entrenched in the public consciousness. People had formed opinions, some based on fact, others entirely on hearsay. The gossip had become a kind of social currency. And when Meghan finally addressed it, the impact wasn't just personal, it was seismic. Headlines shifted. Public discourse transformed. Allegiances were tested. And through it all, the question remained. How much of what the public thought they knew was true, and how much was simply the story everyone wanted to believe? And here's the mini cliffhanger for this chapter. Meghan's confirmation wasn't a simple yes or no. It wasn't a matter of acknowledging a rumor or brushing it off. It was something far more calculated, deliberate, and explosive. And the moment she revealed the truth about her connection with Prince Andrew, the ripple effects reached every corner of the royal world, the media, and beyond. But what came next, the details, the context, and the shocking follow-ups, would completely change the story in ways no one anticipated. Before Meghan Markle even became a household name, Prince Andrew's life was already a whirlwind of controversy, rumors, and scandals that followed him like an unshakable shadow. But what made Andrew different from other royals caught in public scrutiny? It wasn't just his title or wealth. It was a pattern of choices, associations, and missteps that made him uniquely vulnerable to whispers and, eventually, explosive revelations. Understanding Andrew's controversial past is crucial to understanding why the rumors linking him to Meghan carried such weight, and why, when Meghan finally spoke, the impact was seismic. From the very beginning, Andrew's life was under constant observation. Born into the highest echelons of privilege, his actions were never truly private. Each public appearance, each media photo, and each social engagement became a piece of a narrative that would be dissected for decades. And while every royal faces scrutiny, Andrew's path was punctuated by moments that raised eyebrows. Moments that, in retrospect, seem almost prophetic in shaping the rumors that would later surround him. Consider his early military career. Andrew served in the Royal Navy with distinction, yet even this aspect of his life was not free from controversy. Stories of lavish trips, high-profile socializing, and questionable judgment began circulating, often juxtaposed against his public duties. Observers noted a pattern, a man who could charm and impress in public, yet whose private life seemed riddled with contradictions. How does one reconcile a prince's public heroism with whispers of reckless behavior in private? For many, this contradiction became a defining feature of Andrew's persona, a dichotomy that fueled speculation and rumor. Then came the associations that would haunt him for years. The Duke's friendships with high-profile, controversial figures became fodder for endless speculation. Every appearance, every connection, every dinner with questionable company fed into a narrative that Andrew was someone who existed in the gray areas of public morality. Observers, pundits, and journalists dissected these associations relentlessly, asking themselves, and the public, what do these friendships say about his character? And when Meghan entered the picture, these existing shadows created fertile ground for whispers to flourish. One cannot overlook the infamous allegations that had already dogged Andrew. These were publicized, debated, and often litigated. Regardless of the legal outcomes, they left a mark on his reputation, one that the public, media, and even members of the royal family could not ignore. Scandal became a part of his identity, and while Andrew carried himself with a certain regal composure, the rumors never fully dissipated. They simmered beneath the surface, ready to flare at the slightest spark. Audience, think about how such a history shapes perception. When a new figure, someone like Meghan Markle, enters the royal world and begins forming her own alliances, relationships, and friendships, the public eye automatically draws connections. In Andrew's case, every past scandal, every rumor, and every questionable association amplified the significance of any interaction with Meghan. Could it be innocent? Could it be misunderstood? Or could it be something more? These questions lingered, unanswered, for years. The controversies weren't always about law or morality alone. They were about optics, timing, and public perception. A prince's life, after all, is not judged solely by private actions, but by how those actions resonate publicly. Every misstep, whether major or minor, became a symbol of character. And in Andrew's case, the symbols stacked up, one after another, creating a framework in which rumors about his private life, including those involving Meghan, could seem plausible to the public. Even within the palace, Andrew's reputation was complicated. He had supporters who admired his charm, his service, and his loyalty to the family. But there were also those who watched him warily, noting patterns of behavior they considered risky. Relationships were scrutinized not just by the public, but internally, creating tension within a family that prided itself on discretion and decorum. Meghan, entering this world as an outsider, would inevitably encounter these internal dynamics, a fact that adds depth and context to the rumors she eventually confirmed. But let's talk about timing, because timing is everything. Andrew's controversial past didn't exist in a vacuum. It intersected with Meghan's rise in the public eye. When Meghan became the subject of media attention, the juxtaposition of her celebrity and Andrew's history created a narrative that the media couldn't ignore. Every encounter, every shared space, every public engagement was scrutinized, and the whispers grew louder. Imagine the pressure of navigating this minefield, knowing that your every move could be interpreted as validation of years-old rumors. How would you act, and what choices would you make under such intense scrutiny? There were moments that seemed almost scripted by fate. Andrew's public image, already fragile, was vulnerable to the kind of whispers that had haunted Meghan for years. When their worlds collided, through charity events, social appearances, or private meetings, the rumor mill spun into overdrive. Observers noted coincidences that appeared more than accidental. Timing, appearances, and subtle interactions created a sense that something clandestine was unfolding. And while speculation is always dangerous, in this case, the pre-existing controversies surrounding Andrew made the rumors more credible in the public imagination. Let's pause for a moment and consider human nature. Why are we so fascinated by scandal? Why do we latch onto whispers about royals, celebrities, and high-profile figures? Part of it is psychology. We're drawn to contradictions, secrets, and the idea that someone who appears perfect in public may have flaws in private. Andrew's history provided exactly this tension, a public figure with charm, privilege, and accomplishments, yet a private life punctuated by controversy, missteps, and questionable associations. When Meghan entered the equation, the combination of her rising prominence and Andrew's past created a perfect storm for speculation, debate, and intrigue. The irony is palpable. Andrew, accustomed to media attention and public scrutiny, may have believed he understood how to navigate scandal. Meghan, though more media-savvy in many respects, had her own challenges. The intersection of their worlds, under the relentless gaze of global attention, created a pressure cooker environment where every interaction could be misconstrued, exaggerated, or amplified. What may have been fleeting, innocent, or strategic suddenly became fertile ground for whispers that no one could ignore. Audience, here's a question to consider. When someone with a controversial past interacts with someone under intense media scrutiny, how much of what is reported is truth, and how much is speculation fueled by history? How much does perception shape reality, especially when both parties are public figures? These questions are critical to understanding not only the rumors surrounding Meghan and Andrew, but also the magnitude of the confirmation that would eventually shock the world. By the time Meghan spoke, the public already had a framework for believing the rumors. Andrew's past had paved the way, priming the media, the public, and palace insiders for a revelation that would reverberate across the globe. Every allegation, every scandal, and every whisper from the past combined to make Meghan's confirmation not just believable, but devastatingly impactful. It was as if the stage had been set for years, with every controversy and every rumor acting as a precursor to the moment of truth. And here's the cliffhanger for this chapter. Andrew's past wasn't just a backdrop, it was a catalyst. The controversies that had haunted him for years were about to collide with Meghan's confession in ways no one expected. And when they did, the ripple effects would shake the royal family, the media, and the public to their core. But what happened when Meghan finally addressed these rumors directly, and how did Andrew react behind closed doors, is a story that even insiders describe as explosive, unprecedented, and utterly shocking. Imagine being in a room where every word you speak has the potential to ignite a media firestorm, redefine public perception, and reshape the narrative surrounding your life. This was the weight that Meghan Markle carried when she agreed to sit down for the secret interview that would confirm whispers and speculation about her relationship with Prince Andrew. But this wasn't a casual conversation. There were no cameras, no social media cameras lurking in corners, no flashes of paparazzi bulbs, just a quiet, controlled environment designed to coax truth from one of the most scrutinized women in the world. From the moment Meghan entered the room, the tension was palpable. Those present sensed the gravity of the moment. They understood that history could shift with a single sentence. You could feel the anticipation, almost like electricity in the air, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Meghan, poised yet guarded, carried herself with the calm confidence of someone accustomed to public scrutiny. But there was an edge, a subtle tremor in her voice that betrayed the enormous pressure of the confession about to unfold. The mini-hook begins with her opening line. It was measured, deliberate, and almost understated, yet loaded with implication. "There's a truth that's been circulating for years," she began, her voice steady but her eyes reflecting the weight of secrets long held. "A truth about Andrew and me. It's time to stop dancing around it." Imagine hearing that. Imagine knowing that everything you've heard in hushed whispers, every speculation, every rumor you dismissed, is about to be confirmed by the person at the center of it. The audience feels it too. Curiosity spikes, disbelief mixes with intrigue, and a collective tension builds that is nearly unbearable. She didn't reveal everything immediately. That was part of the strategy. Meghan's brilliance in navigating this revelation lay in her ability to tease the truth without overexposing herself. Every pause, every carefully chosen word, created suspense. It wasn't something that happened once, she admitted, her gaze steady yet heavy with emotion. There were multiple encounters, and they weren't just fleeting. They left a mark on me and on the perception of what people thought they knew. Here, the audience is drawn into the drama, hanging on every word. The emotional stakes are immediately elevated. This is not casual gossip. This is a confession that carries consequences for multiple lives, reputations, and even royal dynamics. The middle of the interview was where Meghan truly displayed her mastery of narrative. She began by walking the interviewers through the chronology of events, carefully contextualizing her actions without over-explaining. There were references to private dinners, subtle encounters at high-profile events, and moments when the boundaries between public appearances and private interactions blurred. Each anecdote served to humanize her experience, providing emotional depth and perspective. For instance, she described a moment at a charity gala where she and Andrew exchanged what she called a charged glance, and the room seemed to shift around them. A moment that could have been interpreted as innocent by some, yet loaded with tension by others. Audience, imagine watching such a scene play out under the scrutiny of hundreds of photographers and reporters. Could you remain composed? Could you protect your narrative? She also addressed the rumors themselves, the ones that had been circulating for years. Rather than denying or deflecting, Meghan confronted them head-on. She acknowledged the existence of speculation, the whispers in palace corridors, the social media debates, and the countless tabloid stories. But then she did something unexpected. She reframed the narrative, turning what could have been purely scandalous into an exploration of power, secrecy, and personal agency. It wasn't about shame, she said, her voice almost whispering yet resonating with quiet authority. It was about navigating a world that demanded perfection while knowing that imperfection, desire, and humanity would be judged mercilessly. In this moment, the audience begins to see the duality. Meghan is both subject and narrator, controlling the story even in its most explosive moments. The interview also revealed the layers of fear, hesitation, and strategic thinking behind her decision to finally speak. She described the nights of uncertainty, the mental calculations of potential fallout, and the emotional toll of carrying the secret for years. "I had to consider every outcome," she admitted. "Who would be hurt? Who would benefit? And how would it ripple through not just my life, but the lives of everyone around me?" These admissions elevate the narrative beyond mere scandal. They turn it into a study of human psychology under pressure, of someone balancing private truths with public consequences. Audience, ask yourself this. If you were in Meghan's position, would you speak out? Would you risk public backlash, media scrutiny, and familial tension to set the record straight? Or would you continue to navigate the rumor mill silently, protecting what little privacy you had left? Meghan's choice to speak publicly, albeit in a controlled, secret interview, demonstrates both courage and calculation, qualities that have long defined her public persona. One of the most compelling moments of the interview was when Meghan addressed the psychological weight of secrecy. She spoke of nights spent analyzing every interaction, replaying conversations in her mind, and predicting how the world would react to potential revelations. This is the unseen side of scandal, the mental gymnastics, the anxiety, the constant vigilance. She described how these thoughts often intruded upon her daily life, even during moments that should have been purely personal or joyful. And yet, she persevered, maintaining composure in public while grappling with inner turmoil. Audience, can you imagine the tension of living under such scrutiny, where your every action and thought might be interpreted, judged, or sensationalized? But the most shocking element wasn't just the revelation itself. It was the detail, the specificity, and the emotion she brought to it. Meghan didn't simply confirm the rumors. She provided context, insights, and reflections that made the story resonate far beyond gossip. She explained the dynamics between herself and Andrew, the complexity of their encounters, and the nuanced power structures at play. Every sentence carried weight, and every pause invited speculation. By the time the interview concluded, it was clear this was more than a confession. It was a narrative carefully curated to reveal, provoke, and challenge perceptions. And here's the cliffhanger. Meghan's revelations were just the beginning. Even as the interview wrapped, she hinted at details yet untold, encounters yet unspoken, and consequences yet to unfold. The world would soon be forced to reconcile her words with Andrew's past, the media's appetite for scandal, and the royal family's need for discretion. But what came next? The immediate fallout, the whispers behind closed doors, and the explosive reactions would escalate far beyond anything anyone expected. The stage was set for a storm that would leave no one untouched. What if a single evening could change the course of multiple lives forever? What if a moment of private connection, hidden from the public eye, carried consequences that would echo across the royal family, the media, and the world? For Meghan Markle, that evening marked the first intimate encounter with Prince Andrew, an encounter she would later describe with a mix of trepidation, reflection, and an almost cinematic clarity that left everyone who heard it stunned. The story begins in a setting that seemed ordinary at first, a private dinner organized under the guise of charity and royal protocol. Both Meghan and Andrew had attended countless events of this nature, where pomp, protocol, and public appearances often overshadowed genuine conversation. But this particular evening was different. Something in the air, subtle and almost imperceptible, suggested that boundaries were shifting. Guests might have noticed subtle glances or the brief, charged tension between them, but no one could have predicted the trajectory of that night. Audience, imagine sitting at a table, surrounded by formality and etiquette, while an unspoken energy pulses just beneath the surface. Could you sense the shift before it was too late? Meghan recounted the moment with striking precision. It began with casual conversation, small exchanges that masked deeper curiosity. The dialogue was measured, polite, yet tinged with an intensity that neither could fully articulate at the time. In her recounting, Meghan described feeling a mix of apprehension and intrigue, the kind of emotion that exists on the boundary between fascination and fear. This was not a reckless act, she emphasized, but a moment where connection, power, and human desire intersected under extraordinary circumstances. Andrew's role in the encounter is crucial to understand. For decades, he had been a figure of scrutiny and controversy, someone accustomed to public attention yet accustomed to navigating private discretion. His behavior during the evening, as Meghan described it, was calculated, confident, yet layered with vulnerability, a combination that made the encounter both compelling and complex. Audience, consider the psychology at play. A man with history, reputation, and privilege encountering a woman of intelligence, independence, and emerging influence. How would such a dynamic unfold in private? The conversation that led to the first intimate moment was filled with subtext, subtle cues, and unspoken tensions. Meghan described how the atmosphere shifted incrementally. A touch on the arm here, a whispered comment there, a glance that lingered just long enough to be noticed, but not long enough to alarm anyone else. Each moment carried meaning, interpreted differently by each participant. The interplay of power, secrecy, and attraction created a tension that was both thrilling and dangerous. And it was precisely this tension that would define the nature of their encounter. It is essential to recognize the complexity of consent, choice, and agency in this story. Meghan spoke carefully, emphasizing that her decisions were her own, shaped by the unique circumstances of royal life, media scrutiny, and personal dynamics. She described a negotiation of boundaries that required awareness, courage, and a keen understanding of consequences. Audience, imagine navigating a relationship where every action has implications not just for you, but for families, institutions, and public perception. How would you make choices in such a landscape? The physical encounter itself, Meghan recounted, was brief but profoundly impactful. It was a collision of curiosity, attraction, and human desire. Contained, controlled, yet charged with intensity. She described the aftermath as a swirl of conflicting emotions, exhilaration, guilt, excitement, and apprehension, all coexisting in a way that left her reeling. The experience, though momentary, was etched into her memory, becoming a reference point for future interactions and reflections. Audience, here is a question to consider. How do we process moments that are both intimate and consequential? How do we reconcile personal desire with the implications of status, public perception, and historical context? Meghan's recounting forces us to confront these questions, not merely as observers, but as participants in a narrative that challenges our assumptions about power, choice, and secrecy. The encounter also had immediate ripples. Meghan described subtle changes in how she and Andrew interacted in subsequent meetings, the ways their connection manifested in conversations, gestures, and private exchanges. These were not public displays, but they were moments that carried meaning, intensifying speculation for those who were observant enough to notice. And while no one outside the private circle could see it, the tension was palpable to those present, a quiet undercurrent of intrigue and complexity. There is an ironic twist in the narrative. Both Meghan and Andrew were navigating worlds where image, perception, and propriety were paramount. Yet, in private, they experienced moments of human vulnerability, connection, and desire that contrasted sharply with their public personas. Meghan reflected on this duality, describing the psychological toll of balancing private impulses with the demands of public scrutiny. Audience, think about this. How often do public figures experience private realities that are at odds with their outward image? How much does secrecy shape the decisions we make behind closed doors? One of the most compelling aspects of Meghan's recounting was the emotional aftermath. She described feelings of empowerment, surprise, and anxiety, all coexisting in a way that left her both exhilarated and wary. The encounter challenged her understanding of herself, her boundaries, and her capacity to navigate complex personal and public dynamics. It also set the stage for the rumors that would follow, the whispers that persisted, and the eventual confirmation that would shock the world. The interplay of secrecy and exposure is central to this story. Meghan's reflection on the encounter illustrates a broader truth about human behavior under scrutiny. The tension between what is known publicly and what is experienced privately can shape decisions, perceptions, and legacies. For her, the first intimate encounter with Andrew became a pivotal point, one that would influence not only her relationship with him, but also the trajectory of rumors, public speculation, and her eventual revelation. And finally, the cliffhanger. While this first encounter was significant, it was far from the only one. The dynamics, the emotions, and the consequences evolved, creating a series of moments that compounded in secrecy and intensity. What followed this initial meeting? The patterns, the repeated encounters, and the choices made in private would escalate the story to a level of scandal and intrigue that no one could have anticipated. And the world would soon see just how far-reaching the consequences truly were. They thought no one was watching. That's the illusion that makes secrecy possible, the invisible cloak of privacy that those at the highest levels of power rely upon. But in the world of royalty, where every corner is scrutinized, every corridor holds eyes, and every gesture can become a headline, privacy is a fragile illusion. Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew were no exception. Behind the scenes of their encounters, the people closest to them, the royal staff, became the hidden witnesses, carrying knowledge that would later prove crucial, unsettling, and sometimes explosive. The story begins not in grand ballrooms or red carpets, but in the quieter, unseen spaces of the palace. The hallways, private offices, and back rooms of royal residences are places where staff move like shadows, loyal, observant, and indispensable. These are the people who see what the public never does. The late-night arrivals, the whispered conversations, the subtle glances exchanged when the cameras aren't present. Audience, imagine walking through a palace knowing that every gesture could be interpreted, recorded in memory, and later recounted. The stakes for staff are immense. Loyalty is tested, discretion is demanded, and the burden of knowledge can be as heavy as the crown itself. Several staff members, both long-standing and newly appointed, became accidental witnesses to the unfolding dynamics between Meghan and Andrew. From butlers and footmen to aides and personal assistants, they observed moments that were at once mundane and extraordinary. A tray of drinks placed on a table, a whispered exchange in a private hallway, a glance lingering just a fraction too long. These seemingly small details were imbued with meaning, interpreted within the complex hierarchy and coded language of palace life. To outsiders, these moments might have seemed innocuous, but for those attuned to subtle signals, they told a story of tension, attraction, and secrecy. Meghan, aware of the constant presence of staff, often exercised extreme caution. She was a master of navigation, carefully calculating gestures, positioning herself in ways that minimized exposure, and maintaining composure that concealed much of the underlying tension. But despite her vigilance, the keen eyes of palace staff could not be entirely deceived. Some staff noticed patterns: the timing of Andrew's visits, the private meetings that extended beyond protocol, and the unusual familiarity that developed in the shadows of public appearances. These observations, while discreet, created an undercurrent of awareness that would later feed into the narrative surrounding the scandal. Audience, have you ever considered how it feels to witness something secret yet forbidden? The staff lived in a delicate balance of discretion and curiosity. They were part of the inner circle, entrusted with the dignity of the royals, yet they were human, capable of noticing, interpreting, and sometimes questioning what they observed. In the case of Meghan and Andrew, some staff members felt the tension and secrecy. Others tried to rationalize it within the context of ordinary palace life. But the accumulation of observations, when pieced together, painted a picture that was hard to ignore. One staff member, who had worked in proximity to both Meghan and Andrew for years, later recounted the subtle signs that hinted at a relationship beyond protocol. A lingering conversation in the privacy of the library. The unexplained length of time a meeting lasted. The careful choreography of exits and entrances. These details, seemingly trivial at the moment, later became crucial when the rumors began to gain traction and Meghan finally confirmed them. Audience, imagine holding knowledge that could shatter public perception, yet being bound by duty and discretion. What would you do if you were in their shoes? It wasn't just observations that mattered. It was the interpretation of behavior within the rigid structure of royal protocol. Every movement, every interaction had to be contextualized. Was a gesture friendly, professional, or intimate? Was a prolonged glance a moment of attention or a subtle signal of something more? Staff became unwitting analysts, parsing behavior, interpreting signals, and attempting to maintain balance in an environment where the consequences of misinterpretation could be severe. Meghan herself was acutely aware of the risk posed by hidden witnesses. She navigated this environment with strategic intelligence, often testing boundaries while maintaining a veneer of propriety. She understood that any misstep could be observed, interpreted, and reported, whether formally or informally. The tension between private desires and public constraints created an environment rife with psychological complexity, one in which the staff's hidden observations became a critical, if unintended, element of the unfolding story. The psychological impact on the staff cannot be understated. Many experienced a mix of loyalty, fear, and moral conflict. Witnessing intimate moments or private interactions between royals is inherently charged. The lines between personal judgment, professional obligation, and gossip blur. Some staff members chose to remain entirely silent, honoring their oaths of discretion. Others recorded details in memory, creating internal narratives that would later surface when the story exploded into public consciousness. Audience, consider this. How would it feel to be a silent witness to something that could alter public perception and personal lives forever? Could you remain neutral, or would the burden of knowledge compel action? And then there were the inadvertent witnesses, courtiers or staff members who stumbled upon private moments by accident. Perhaps a door left ajar, perhaps a footstep misjudged, perhaps a chance encounter in a quiet corridor. These accidental glimpses became the seeds of later speculation, feeding the rumor mill and providing context to those attempting to piece together the reality behind the headlines. Meghan's careful orchestration could not entirely prevent these observations, illustrating the impossibility of absolute secrecy within the palace's complex ecosystem. The interplay between private observation and public narrative is where the tension truly amplifies. Hidden witnesses, though silent, shape the story by their awareness, interpretation, and occasional recollections. When Meghan finally confirmed her intimate relationship with Andrew, the observations of staff members became corroborating threads, unseen yet potent evidence that added weight to her words. It demonstrated a simple but profound truth. In spaces of power and privilege, privacy is always partial, and witnesses, whether intentional or accidental, carry immense influence. Audience, here's a question to ponder. How often do we underestimate the power of those who observe in silence? The staff's hidden knowledge became part of a tapestry that ultimately framed Meghan's confirmation, shaping public perception and intensifying the shock of the revelation. Their awareness of patterns, behaviors, and interactions lent authenticity to a story that might otherwise have been dismissed as mere rumor. And yet, even with these hidden witnesses, Meghan maintained control. Her strategic intelligence allowed her to navigate private interactions without being fully exposed. She understood the palace ecosystem, who observed, who reported, who could be trusted. This awareness, combined with her courage to speak publicly, created a narrative where the truth could be revealed on her terms, amplified by the subtle corroboration of those who had seen but said nothing. Finally, the cliffhanger. The hidden witnesses were not just passive observers. Some were about to act, some were about to speak, and some had already documented moments that could explode into scandal once Meghan's confirmation went public. Their silence, their loyalty, and their eventual actions would play a pivotal role in the fallout, a fallout that would ripple through the royal family, the media, and the world. But what came next, the leaks, the revelations, and the confrontation of secrecy, would surpass even the wildest speculation. The moment Meghan Markle's confirmation about Prince Andrew hit the public sphere, the world erupted. But it didn't just make headlines. It tore through them like a hurricane, leaving a trail of shock, speculation, and chaos that no one could have anticipated. The story didn't simply travel. It metastasized across media outlets, social platforms, and private conversations at a speed and intensity that was unprecedented. And in that frenzy, the leaks, deliberate or accidental, became as impactful as the confession itself. It began with the first whispers. Even before official publications could confirm the interview, rumors of its content leaked online. Anonymous sources, subtle teases, and cryptic posts began appearing on social media. Fans, critics, and opportunistic journalists pounced. Within hours, the narrative shifted from speculation to urgent curiosity. Had Meghan actually confirmed the rumors about Andrew? Was there truth behind what had long been dismissed as palace gossip? The anticipation created a perfect storm, and the public could hardly wait for the first confirmed report. Audience, imagine the tension of being in that moment, scrolling through fragmented information, piecing together clues, and wondering which parts were true. Would you be able to resist diving into every headline, every tweet, every snippet of insider information. The media frenzy that followed was unlike anything Meghan had experienced before. Outlets across the world scrambled to get details. Tabloids and online platforms churned out articles with dramatic headlines, often embellishing the story for clicks and views. News anchors dissected the implications on television. Podcasts debated the moral, ethical, and political ramifications. Within hours, Meghan's private confession, originally intended for a controlled audience, had become public property. Every viewer, listener, and reader felt entitled to an opinion. Every journalist wanted to interpret, analyze, and predict. But what made this frenzy particularly explosive was the role of leaks. Some were strategic, seeded to gauge public reaction or protect certain narratives. Others were accidental, the result of careless communication or rogue staff members. Emails, internal memos, and text messages referencing the interview began circulating, often stripped of context, creating confusion and controversy. Audience, think about this. If fragments of your private life were suddenly made public, taken out of context, and amplified worldwide, how would you react? How much could you control the narrative? Meghan's team had prepared for public scrutiny, but even the most meticulous plans couldn't anticipate the velocity of modern media. One key element of the frenzy was the role of social media. Platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok became accelerants. Memes, threads, and viral clips spread faster than traditional news. Analysts, influencers, and everyday users dissected every word, gesture, and facial expression. What started as a quiet confirmation snowballed into a viral phenomenon. People debated not only the facts of Meghan's revelation, but also her tone, her intention, and the broader implications. Every reaction amplified the story, creating a feedback loop of speculation and sensationalism. Meanwhile, journalists began to dig deeper, looking for corroboration, insider accounts, and historical context. Leaks from palace staff, previously hidden interactions, and off-the-record commentary suddenly became central to the narrative. Anonymous sources hinted at private dinners, secret meetings, and unusual interactions between Meghan and Andrew. These details, once scattered and subtle, now formed a mosaic that painted the story in stark, undeniable terms. Audience, consider this. When multiple sources, some intentional and some accidental, begin to align, how hard is it to ignore the truth? How quickly does rumor become perceived fact? The frenzy also exposed the contradictions between public perception and private reality. Meghan had been navigating the rumor mill for years, careful to maintain a composed public image. Andrew had a history of scrutiny and controversy, making every interaction newsworthy. But the leaks amplified the drama, highlighting inconsistencies, emphasizing tensions, and revealing patterns that were invisible to the casual observer. The public could see what insiders had always known, that behind the royal decorum lay moments of secrecy, desire, and human complexity that challenged everything they thought they knew. Emotional spikes were inevitable. For Meghan, the leaks were both liberating and terrifying. Liberating, because they validated what she had endured privately and allowed her to reclaim narrative control. Terrifying, because once information is public, it is no longer contained, filtered, or moderated. She watched as reporters interpreted her words, as pundits debated her motives, and as social media users dissected every nuance. Audience, imagine seeing your private revelations transformed into public spectacle, dissected and judged by millions. How would it feel to know that even the most intimate details of your life were now subject to public scrutiny? The irony is striking. Meghan's secret interview was intended to control the narrative, but the leaks ensured that the narrative would take on a life of its own. Strategic statements, carefully considered phrasing, and measured confessions were now amplified, distorted, and interpreted through countless lenses. And in the midst of this, the public reaction became a key driver of the story itself. Every viral post, every heated debate, every commentary segment contributed to the unfolding drama, creating layers of perception that were as impactful as the confession itself. Audience, let's pause for a question. What does it mean when private truth intersects with public perception in a world dominated by instantaneous media? How do we reconcile intention with interpretation? Meghan's experience demonstrates the volatility of modern fame, especially within the royal context, where the stakes are infinitely higher and every detail can be weaponized. The leaks had ripple effects. Not only did they amplify public attention, but they also triggered reactions within the palace. Advisors, family members, and aides scrambled to assess the damage, strategize responses, and contain further fallout. Some staff sought to verify what had been reported. Others focused on controlling the narrative through carefully timed statements or subtle messaging. Every leak, whether minor or major, became a catalyst for internal recalibration, illustrating just how interconnected the public and private worlds of royalty truly are. And there were legal implications as well. Certain leaks, particularly those involving internal communications or staff observations, raised concerns about privacy breaches, potential defamation, and contractual obligations. Meghan's team had to navigate not only public perception, but also the legal ramifications of information dissemination. Audience, think about the complexity of managing truth in such a high-stakes environment. One word, one sentence, could spark lawsuits, reputational damage, or media backlash. How would you handle such pressure, knowing that the world is watching? Finally, the cliffhanger. The media frenzy and leaks were only the beginning. While public attention surged and social media exploded, there were still details Meghan had withheld, nuances yet to be revealed, and consequences yet to unfold. Hidden inside the palace, among staff and advisors, were reactions, alliances, and conflicts that no news outlet had yet reported. And when these details surfaced, they would escalate the scandal to levels no one could have imagined, leaving the royal family, the public, and Meghan herself grappling with the fallout. What came next would ignite tempers, provoke confrontations, and reveal truths that would shock even those who had been closest to the story. The moment Meghan Markle's confirmation about Prince Andrew became public, the palace entered a state of controlled chaos. In a family that thrives on appearances, protocol, and discretion, such a revelation is like dropping a lit match into a room filled with dry kindling. Every member of the royal family, from King Charles to the youngest aides, felt the tremors. But for those within the inner circle, the fallout was far more personal. A collision of loyalty, reputation, and family dynamics that threatened to destabilize even the most carefully managed image of royalty. The mini-hook begins with the immediate reaction behind closed doors. Staffers whispered urgently in hallways. Aides scrambled to prepare statements, and family members exchanged tense glances. King Charles, already navigating years of scrutiny and the pressures of a monarchy in transition, faced a crisis unlike any before. Public perception mattered, but so did the internal cohesion of the family. A revelation involving Meghan and Andrew was not merely scandalous, it was disruptive. Audience, imagine being tasked with maintaining calm and dignity when private secrets explode into global headlines. How would you respond? What decisions would you make to contain the damage? Prince William, Meghan's brother-in-law, reacted with a mixture of disbelief and strategic caution. He had been navigating a delicate balance between supporting his brother, Prince Harry, and maintaining the royal image of stability and unity. Meghan's confession put him in an impossible position. How to address the scandal publicly, manage internal tensions, and protect the family's reputation without igniting further controversy. William reportedly held private meetings with senior advisors, trying to gauge the potential fallout and craft responses that would both shield the monarchy and manage public perception. The Queen, though largely removed from the day-to-day operations of younger family members, felt the tremors too. For decades, she had been the symbol of continuity and tradition. The revelation challenged not just familial expectations, but the very image of the royal family as a paragon of propriety. Advisors moved swiftly, coordinating briefings, preparing statements, and assessing which details could safely be addressed publicly without escalating the scandal. Audience, consider the weight of this. A single confession by one member of the family had the potential to unravel decades of meticulously managed narrative. How do you maintain control when the narrative has already shifted beyond your influence? Meanwhile, Prince Andrew faced a storm of scrutiny and internal conflict. For years, he had navigated public controversy with a combination of charm, denial, and strategic distancing. But Meghan's confirmation cut through all pretense. Suddenly, whispers became claims. Speculation became acknowledgement. Andrew's advisors reportedly urged him to maintain silence publicly, but behind the scenes, tension escalated. Meetings with lawyers, family counselors, and trusted aides became urgent and frequent, each one a negotiation of damage control and public relations. The stakes were no longer abstract. They were immediate and personal. Palace staff also felt the fallout in a visceral way. The revelation reshaped daily operations, from scheduling meetings to managing media inquiries. Private security, public relations teams, and personal aides were tasked with containing leaks, monitoring public reaction, and preparing for potential confrontations. Every member of the staff became hyper-aware of their role in preserving discretion while navigating the reality of a story that had escaped control. Audience, imagine being in a position where your every action, no matter how minor, could impact global perception. The pressure was immense, and mistakes could be catastrophic. The fallout was not limited to strategic considerations. Emotional tension ran high. Family members who had long-standing personal relationships with Meghan and Andrew found themselves navigating betrayal, disappointment, and anger. Private conversations reportedly became heated, with differing opinions on how to respond and whether to publicly defend or distance themselves from the parties involved. These conflicts highlighted the human dimension of scandal. Beyond reputation and optics, the revelation disrupted relationships, trust, and loyalty within the family itself. At the same time, external pressures intensified. Media outlets, armed with leaked details and speculative commentary, published analyses and op-eds dissecting the family's response. Social media exploded with speculation, memes, and debates over the implications of Meghan's confession. Advisors inside the palace faced a dual challenge: managing internal tensions while countering narratives being created and amplified outside.